I was fortunate to work with over the years. I was fortunate to work with many ESS teachers, whether it is in the national curriculum. Initially, I started as a biology and environmental science teacher in Doon School way back in '98. That's when the school had a mandatory environmental education curriculum. And then ICSC and ISC, they came in, they started environmental science and environmental applications to start with. Initially, they started with environmental science in year 11 and 12, then they moved to environmental applications, year 9 and 10, and then environmental education became mandatory in the national curriculum. So I was, at that point, I was invited to work on preparing the curriculum for environmental education, the whole environmental education curriculum for ICSC and ISC. I did that at one point of time. I mean, I didn't know how I did it at that point. I was young, maybe that time. Now I'm old, so now I don't find time to do all the kind of things or the energy to do it. But I was the chief examiner for all environmental applications, environmental sciences, and environmental education at one point of time. When I moved to IB, I mean, way back in 2006, I think, I moved, Doon School adopted IB, and that's when I moved to IB and I started teaching environmental systems and societies. As many of you who are new to teaching environmental systems and societies at the moment and have 1 or 2 years of experience, you're not in an area where you should feel that, oh, it's completely something different and I'm unable to understand or whatever is happening. Because when I started teaching, I felt the same. In spite of all the experience that I had in the national curriculum, when I started teaching IB, when I started working with ESS, in the first 2 years, the results were really bad. When I started working on the IA, the criterion was not clear. There were a lot of changes happening at that point of time for environmental systems and societies. And slowly, got the grip of it. And now we do well. And in the last 8 to 9 years, though I'm not regularly teaching in the classes now because I became head of school and don't find much of time to do it. But I still work with IB and I'm still helping my students in the school in terms of their IAs and all that. And so I keep working on IA criteria as well. And at one point, when I was in 13 or 14, I was invited to the Grade Award Committee meeting as an observer. That was an opportunity that we had at that point of time. These days, they don't do it. But at that point of time, I was invited to Cardiff as an observer for the Grade Award Committee meeting for ESS IAs. And I was fortunate to see, how the grading is done and how the checks and balances are made. And at that point of time is when actually this current ESS criteria, what you see now, was formulated at that meeting. And later on at that point, in terms of terminology that you use, what does it mean and what is acceptable, what is not, and how do you interpret this criteria? So we'll be talking about all that. And as Guru said, though I planned the session for 1 hour, people say that, when I start talking, I don't stop. So I'm not sure. But yes, we will stick to the time limit. We will try to finish in 1.5 hours, everything. And if you have any queries or any questions, please type them on Padlet. Me and Guru at a later stage, we will just answer your questions and send the copy to everyone else. Let's come back to the session. Many of you, and I understand all of you who are there at the moment, how many of you are actually environmental sciences teachers or environmental subject specialists in terms of your training or your education? How many of you actually did? I mean, you can show a thumbs up if you did an environmental sciences master's or environmental sciences exposure in your university. How many of you are there who did environmental systems or environmental sciences? Okay, 1, I see 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's good. Good 25% of the people are trained in environmental systems and environmental sciences or environmental chemistry or the environmental education. There are different universities call them by different names. Way back when I was studying in 95, 98, it was only environmental chemistry, which I did in my master's and MPhil both. But what I see is over the years, the teachers who are teaching either biology, chemistry, or geography are the teachers who are generally given the environmental systems and society subject in schools, even if it is IB schools. At the maximum, what schools will do is they'll put you up for a training with IB, category 1, category 2, depending on that. But by training, by experience, most of the teachers who teach, in my opinion, I may be wrong, most of the teachers who teach are actually from life sciences background or from earth sciences background. That's what I observed. And it's easy also, the subject is actually environmental sciences. It's true to its nature, transdisciplinary subject, what they call it. It amalgamates all your business management concepts. It brings in your economics. It brings in your biology. It brings in your geography, everything together as one subject. It's an integrated curriculum. And most of you are well versed with how the curriculum goes. Now, so there's a lot of pressure on the teachers to prove that, number one, to the schools and the administration that yes, they can do this subject. For many schools, and for all of us, in fact, not many schools, environmental education, environmental systems and societies is generally a subject which is given to people who are not good in sciences. Let us be very open and frank on it. We are all environmental science teachers and we know it. In your classes, you may be having, say, 20 students doing environmental sciences or environmental systems and societies, ESS. But how many of them actually are doing the subject out of their sheer interest in the subject? And how many of them are made to do the subject by your IB coordinators because they need they need a science subject, and that this subject meets the requirement for the IB diploma requirements and IB diploma criteria? Or, in my experience over the last 15 years of teaching ESS, I saw I would say around 30% of the students are really interested in doing ESS and they take this subject, notwithstanding the number of students that are there. But remaining 70% are those who are actually asked to do this subject to meet their either university criteria or IB diploma criteria. And we all understand. And when that happens, the pressure becomes more on the teachers. And we all know that. Because we are dealing with students who have certain amount of background in their sciences, whether in IGCSE or middle school. But at the same time, their focus is mainly on business management, economics, psychology, whatever they're doing in humanities or languages. But science is something which was forcefully given to them so that they have to do it. So the pressure on the teachers is very high. And that is where most of you actually must be feeling the pressure also, what to do with these students, how do we make them work? And end of the day, the other aspect is 25% weightage of IA is worth the kind of attention and time that we give it to them? Because IB says only 10 hours of ESS IA. And we all know that we spend more than 50 hours on that IAs, looking at the drafts, doing it, redoing it, doing everything that we want to do. But is that 25% weightage is that worth that kind of time that we do, or we spend 75% weightage focus on that theory examination and the paper 1 and paper 2 and just do whatever is required for IA and submit it? So those are different kind of, we have to make our own priorities, right? But IA becomes a requirement. So let's talk about IA and what to expect in an IA that we are going to do, that we are going to discuss about it. And especially in situations like this pandemic, where you are sitting at home, your students are sitting at home, most of the time on their video games or Netflix or Amazon Prime, or even while you are teaching. And how do you make them do an ESSIA and get the quality out the way that you are looking at? And what are the possible topics that you can work on where you still meet the criterion in terms of this pandemic? It's going to be there for another couple of years, let me tell you that. So how are you going to do it for the next couple of years? So let's start looking at it and about it. Is it easy for your students? As I said, the profile of the students I explained to you earlier. So is it easy for our students to pick up a topic from the existing syllabus and start working through that topic, than trying to find something, trying to be adventurous, trying to bring something from outside, trying to be, okay, let's talk about this whole thing. Currently there is some other issue going on and somewhere else, or there's starvation going on. There is floods in Europe right now. There's a major climate change effect in the past 3 days. So we can pick up a current issue, but we should be able to connect it to your syllabus. It's much easier for children to understand, because sometimes people become very adventurous. Okay, let me do something completely different. And when they try doing it, there is a chance of students getting lost in what they wanted to do. So just be focused on that and try to stick to your syllabus, whichever you are doing, and try to stick to that. And when do we do it? Some teachers want to introduce it in the first 6 months of doing the ESS curriculum, in the first year itself, in year 11. But in my opinion, it's too early to do it, because, as I said, many of them don't even have an idea of the subject, what the subject is all about. So at least the first year, give them that introduction, give them that footing into the subject before you introduce your IA. Maybe towards the end of the year, you can introduce the IA topics, or you can introduce the IA criterion and the whole idea of how to do the ESS IA, and then give them the holidays to start thinking about it, to form a research question, start looking for data sources. So that's the best way to do it. Have a 2-month vacation or 6 weeks vacation. So let them start working there, then trying to finish it. Okay, I just want to finish it sort of thing. Sometimes your coordinators also might be rushing you. But when you have your meetings in your schools, when you have your IB calendars being prepared, be very clear with your coordinators that your ESSIA introduction you'll be doing during end of year 1, and then move ahead after that. But before that, I would sincerely urge that if you are doing a biodiversity, if you are doing environmental ecological values, or any or pollution aspects or management, anything that you are doing, try to do some, say, 750 words or 800 words or 1,000 word pieces from there, following that criteria. Because what you can do is, you can subtly bring in the criterion to the students to make them understand what the grading is like. It could be your summative, actually. A summative can be your informal case study that you do in the class. It may not be your IA, but at least students will start understanding, how do I formulate a research question? What is a good research question? What is a context that I need to understand? Or how do I get this data? How do I interpret data? What kind of analysis do I need to do with this data? What does it mean by evaluating the data? How do I reach a conclusion? So how do I formulate a method to do a study? So give that, you can do that different ways of doing it. You can work on like this one. Any of these things. You can do a lab study, you can do a laboratory work, you can use some primary data collection for them if the situation is good. Right now, children are not allowed to go out, but when it was feasible, we did that. Use the secondary data, use surveys, train the students in the first. See, you got to make the subject interesting. It's easy to do a PowerPoint presentation, downloading from somewhere, so many resources available, and doing it and reading it out. It's very easy to do it. But thing is, make the subject interesting, give them field work. One thing I found is the children who do well in ESS are the children actually who had that field experience. Every chapter you can work out something. Biodiversity, okay, go to the field and find out how many species of trees do we have on the species, or make a quadrant, just on the field, see how many insects you find on this quadrant. Try working it out, or do something on the Lincoln Index. Just do some beans and try working on Lincoln Index, or do some Simpsons Diversity Index. Let them do something. That's something that's more important, because end of the day, the subject you have to understand. They are doing it out of compulsion. Make it interesting for them, so that by end of the year, they want to do your IA. And that's what it is going to give them a good grade later on. There's a word limit for your ESSIS. You all know it. It's around 1,500 words to 2250. But remember, this word limit is very important, because as examiners, all IB examiners are very clearly instructed that if the whole text of the content of the IA exceeds 2250, you are allowed to stop reading it. You have to stop reading it, and they don't need to give marks beyond that. Maybe the children get so excited and they do too much on introduction. They do too much on discussion. And suddenly you find that, when you come to evaluation of the data, when you're going to application of solutions, that's when you lose it. Because you already exceeded the word limit, and the actual criterion of application, which gives you 3 marks, or the evaluation, which is 6 marks, half of it is lost because you're not allowed to read it as an examiner also. You need not give a credit to that. So be mindful of the different sections of the IA, different criterion, and see that, how much you are allocating to what, depending on the situation. But remember, your headings, your pictures, your tables, your maps, your data, they are not counted in your word count. It's only the proper text that you are writing. So just remember that. And this is something that you all need to know, because what an examiner is looking at is effective communication. Is the child able to communicate clearly and effectively what they want to say? Because India is a different issue, because most of our IB schools, they offer English as first language. That happens. But when examiners get paper from all over the world, and there are countries where English is mostly a second language, and they do their IAS in English and not in Spanish or French. So language, you are told very clearly, don't give too much attention to your language or grammatical. Your grammar is not important there. As long as a child can communicate, let them do it. Don't you also, as an examiner, as a teacher, don't put too much focus on language. As long as your thing is communicated, don't put red marks all over the IA when you are making your annotations and send it to the examiner or submit it with all the red marks with, here, this off is missing, the is missing, or is missing, this is missing. Don't do all that. It's only the communication that we are looking at. And when I say best fit approach, this is something that you got to be very mindful. Some students, sometimes they're all over the place when they do their IA. The conclusion gets mixed up with evaluation, discussion get mixed up with analysis, all that happens. But sometimes what happens, some students, they may have very good content. They might have done great work on their IAS. So as examiners, we were told to look at the best fit approach. Doesn't matter where the criteria, maybe your conclusion may be in introduction also. You never know. But give credit to the students. That is more important. So some of you might be cursing yourself, oh, I did a mistake last time. Don't worry about it. As long as the content is there, the examiners were very clearly instructed to follow the best fit approach. Whichever criterion fits better, in that particular criteria, if this particular sentence fits there, use it. That's what we were told. So we need to stick to that. So one of the advice that is always given for teachers is, when you start marking your IAS, start from the lowest criteria. So 1 and 2, and then move on. But for the sake of the presentation, keeping the time in mind, I have taken only 5 and 6. Then just for you to understand that, what is a good ESS I like, and what is how do you address a criterion in the most effective manner. So this is directly from the subject guide. So it's not something which I made or anything like that. You all know this. So let me just minimize the screen. Yeah. So we all know that when it comes to context, it's your research question should be relevant, coherent, and focused. That is mandatory. All irrelevant environmental issue need to be identified, either local or global, and provides a context. And it explains the connections between the environmental issue and the research question. So these 3 are very important in context. So how do we understand it as teachers? What do we need to tell the students when we are trying to address this? And I'm talking about 5 and 6 criteria here in the band, but I'm not going below that. But as I said, when you start marking your IAS, you have to start from the lowest thing, and don't just look at 5 and 6 and see. Always think about how do I get my 5 and 6. But first think about how do I address my 1 and 2 first. Is the basic thing there or not? You may be looking at 6, but in that whole our enthusiasm to move up there, it's possible for us, we just miss on the basic aspect, and the whole IA might go for a 6. So just remember that. What is it? Identify the context and environmental issue. So you can talk about pollution, right? So you can talk, I have randomly examples I'll keep giving, because things keep coming in and I'll just keep talking about it. So when you talk about environmental issue, you may talk about air pollution. So your research question is impact of vehicles, impact of vehicular pollution in Gurgaon on the human health or water. Of course, your environmental issue is there. Your environmental issue is your air pollution. You're talking about it. You're talking about the health impacts. And how do you explain this in terms of your context? It is essential that you always go with the global scale and then come down to local context. It's more important, because first you talk about what is the status of air pollution across the globe? What is happening with air pollution? And this is a place where in the beginning of the IA itself, you can give a kind of assurance to the examiner that the child has knowledge of the topic that they are talking about, and the child did certain research or some research about the topic. So this is where you talk about your research. This is where you talk about, how knowledgeable you are as a student in this particular, on this environmental issue that you are going to address. Or it's not some random thing that you picked up because air pollution is very common and you hear the word all over the place. It's not. So, and first you talk about the global level, the impact of air pollution across the globe, whether in terms of global warming, in terms of health impacts, in terms of increasing the smog and whatever it is. Then you come down to local level and you talk about the impact of that particular air pollution or vehicular pollution you are talking about at the local level. So always remember, start at the global level and then move to the local level. That's more important. And what is your focus area? Are you talking about whole of India in general? It's very vague, right? You are not going to go for the whole India data and you're going to analyze it. It's too broad and too vague. So focus it, narrow it down. If you talk about Gurgaon, no one is going to penalize you if you choose, okay, I'm talking about pathways context because I was there for 5 years, so just talking about it. So you talk about the Badshahpur road in pathways. No one is going to penalize you if you don't do whole of Gurgaon and you do only Badshahpur road, one small stretch of the road. Doesn't matter. But you are trying to take that small aspect of air pollution in that particular area based on vehicles, and you are trying to expand it to the whole global scale, and you are trying to link it, how you can analyze the impacts of air pollution from a small scale to a large scale sort of situation. So keep that in mind when you do it. So your research question should be very, very focused. That's more important. One of the mistakes that's done by children all the time is they want to be too adventurous. They want to, even the teachers at times, okay, let's make it big. But thing is, remember, you have 1500 words to 2250 words. How much you can fit in that, and how much data you have, and how much information do you have that which you need to make it concise. You need to, stew the whole thing down into one small essay. So make the job easy for the children also. Teach them to think of a research question which is very focused and identify your focus area. And then a connection should be there on the research question and environmental issue. It should not be like, you talk about air pollution in general, and then your research question is talking about vehicular pollution. So make your environmental issue is also based on vehicular pollution, and after effect maybe the air pollution because of the vehicular emissions. So what happens here is, it's very easy to stray away from this. That's the biggest problem. You identify an environmental issue. Say you talk about global warming. Okay, you talk about environmental issue as global warming, and your RQ, you went into health effects of global air pollution. See, what is happening is when you talk about air pollution, it's very natural as environmental science teachers or students. First thing we talk about is global warming and whatever is greenhouse effect and whatever is happening. But your research question is focusing on the health impacts of vehicular pollution. How is it related to your global warming up there? Just think about it. Environmental issue and RQ, the connection is very important, because from time to time, in your entire 2250 words, you are constantly referring back to your environmental issue and RQ. If you don't do it, you lose the connection. And out of 6, you may be getting a 3 or 4 straight away. There is no connection with the environmental issue. So establish that connection between RQ and EI. It's important. And then, as I said, explain the context. Show all the knowledge of environmental issue and the evidence of research. This is what I said. You can use maps. It's not counted in the word count. You can use tables. You can use data, secondary data of air pollution statistics across the globe. You can choose 5 different countries and talk about air pollution data, and talk about 5 metros in India and take the data and just talk about the condition there. You talk about Jakarta, talk about 5 different areas in Jakarta, and if you have environmental air pollution data, use it. but show some evidence of research. I'll show you one or two exemplars after that, how the research happens, but show some evidence. It's essential that you show that there is knowledge. Otherwise, the examiner will think, okay, the child is talking about it. Does he have any idea about what they're talking about? So evidence of research is very important. You can give references back to bibliography, or you can do MLA citation if you want. It is possible. You can add your maps and pictures, anything you want. It's not counted in the word count, but show that. That makes, the representation is also something which matters. So right, just do that. And one thing that you need to know that, what do you aim to achieve from this RQ? What is your conclusion going to be? Your conclusion may be right or wrong. There's a different issue. No one is judging the student whether they got the right result, and is the conclusion if you say air pollution and health impacts, so there is no air pollution and health impacts anywhere in this particular Gurgaon area sort of thing. So does it work? No, it doesn't work, right? Eutrophication, you talk about eutrophication happening, how this lake is dying, but suddenly you find that the dissolved oxygen levels are so high, for whatever reason, there's a fresh rain or a fresh inflow or heavy floods upstream, and the water level is rising, and your DO level suddenly goes up, and your entire data goes for a 6, if you do a study during monsoon or something like that, although the lake is eutrophied. So you don't know about it, right? So don't worry about it. But in your mind, when you're talking about your RQ, when you are giving your explanation, you need to mention what you aim to achieve from this particular research question. What do you aim to achieve? Are you trying to, if you're doing a survey, say survey on eating habits of the people, or survey on transportation habits of the people, or something like that. Are you trying to achieve something where you want to say that, their value systems have some impact on the way that they use environmental resources? Or you just want to say, I just want to find out what they're doing, and based on that data, I will see what the data is going to be. This is an area, what do you aim to achieve, is something that, when it's, one of the best known practices is let your children submit to you a small abstract of what they wanted to do, right? That's the best thing to start your IA with. In the abstract, you can say that, what do you aim to achieve? You can actually have these questions to them and say, okay, what is your RQ like? What is your environmental issue? What is your RQ? What is the context that you're looking at? And do you have any research supporting your RQ? And what do you aim to achieve from this RQ? So put them in a sequence, and give it as a questionnaire to children. Let them answer it, and you will be helping them, just to formulate a question. Later on, the things will come, but you convert these points into questionnaire and give it to them. Your base of your IA is ready. So keep that in mind, and don't use. Okay, people use to what extent and all that. It's very commonly used. Some teachers, some experienced ESS educators feel that you should not use to what extent, but children are more comfortable doing it because they do the same thing in TOK and everywhere else. They got used to that kind of language. But it doesn't matter what you use, but don't raise a doubt or a question within your RQ. Don't say, what if the concentration of what happens if the increase of fertilizer inflow into this particular lake sort of thing. Don't try to put in a question into your research question. That's very important, because some people, I'll show you a question how it happens. Because the child is undecided about the research question, and they say the impacts of vehicular pollution on humans, if any, and put a question mark. Well, what do you mean by that? You yourself don't know whether there is an impact or not, and you are saying if any, that means you are asking the examiner a question. If any, then I'm going to answer this thing. So don't use that kind of things, because the focus is lost and your question is too vague. So don't use what if any sort of thing in your thing. And remember, though there is no restriction, no IB never comes and checks, but it's a coordinator's responsibility, it's a school's responsibility to ensure. And it does talk about 10 hours of work for IA. And out of which 5 to 6 hours should be given for research on the particular topic. And we all know as ESS teachers, we go well beyond this. But if your question is directly indicating that you will not be able to finish the study in 6 hours or 7 hours, so that's a very clear indication that you did not follow the criteria. So when you are formulating a research question, when you are talking about a topic, you are using a secondary data, primary data, whatever you are doing, please ensure that your question is not too vague not too broad, and at the same time, the scope of the study of your research is within 10 hours and not more than that. Remember that. So that's very important for you when you are formulating your research question. And it's very easy to say that the air pollution causes global warming. It's a very common statement. It's a very, very general statement. Everyone will know. Everyone will talk about it. Don't make generalized statements on environmental issues. When you talk about it, as I said, you did some research. You have to show your research. You have to talk about increase in the oxides of oxygen, nitrogen, or sulfur, or increase in the water vapor content in the atmosphere, or increased transpiration because of increase in temperature. I mean, you got to use the jargon. You all know that, right? So sometimes it's essential that you use the jargon and don't make general statements, in the year. You can encourage your children to use the jargon, to use the terminology, because the terminology is counted in the last communication part in 3 marks. The environmental the terminology of the subject that you use, it is counted as part of those 3 marks. So they need to use the terminology as and when feasible and as much as possible. This is just a suggestion. That's why I put 2 asterisks out there. It is just a suggestion. If you want a clear RQ, very simple, basic idea is mention the location. Try to ensure within the question you have the location of the study. That's very focused. A dependent variable, whether you are measuring whatever controlling factors that you are using, whether it is a pH or DO or whatever you're talking about in your lab conditions and whatever you're doing. So a dependent variable and an independent variable. If you can bring in all 3 into your research question is done. You don't need to bother about the focus areas and all that. Don't need to tweak 10 times. Your question needs to be formulated with the location where you are doing your study. In some places, location is not a concern. You are doing a survey. Even survey location is a concern. Which part of the world you are doing it, which countries you are working on, which school or which area you are going to do the survey. So location of the study, the dependent variable and independent variable. If you can bring this into your question, your research question is irrefutable after that. It's foolproof. So just keep that in mind. It doesn't matter. In a class, you may have 20 students. All of them might have chosen the same topic of air pollution. All of them may be doing water pollution, doesn't matter. As long as they use different variables, different independent variables, different location of the study, it's acceptable. So it's not like, a whole school or 15 students cannot do the same topic. It's not like that, but their research questions will be different. Their methodologies will be different. Their data tables will be different. So keep that in mind when you are working on it. So let's talk about Guru, how are we with time? We are just on the first part.
Yes, sir, we have time, sir. It's a little slow, sir, but you can go fast, a little fast.
I'm going slow?
Yes, sir. You can go fast.
Okay.
Sir, but it's
first time someone told me that.
Sir, some teacher asking some doubts, sir. So can we go now or at the end, sir?
Maybe after this, it's much better. So once we finish RQ, then we go back to that, okay? Once we finish context, then we go to that.
Done, sir, done.
Okay, some sample RQs. It's not something that we are going to discuss for long. Just to give you an idea what kind of RQs that we are looking at. To what extent do different volumes of inorganic fertilizer impact the quality of water from the river or from a lake or tap water that you are talking about through their pH and dissolved oxygen or by measuring the pH and dissolved oxygen? This is a very vague and very broad question. What do you mean by inorganic fertilizer? You're talking about nitrogen, phosphorus, you can be NPK, anything you want, and what kind of fertilizer are we talking about? It's a very vague and very broad. The scope of the study is too much. And you're talking about the entire river, you're talking about certain selected points or anything. So remember this, it's too vague and too broad. The question might seem very interesting. Oh, you should immediately do this question, but it is not. You got to be specific on this. Let's look at the other one. To what extent does vehicular pollution, in whichever area you are talking about, affect the soil quality in terms of its pH, conductivity, and heavy metal concentration? There are 3 specific things that you want to measure. You are talking about 3 things. It is broad, it looks broad, but it's very much feasible. You can get very good data on that. But again, This same thing can be modified into, sometimes students do the distance from the road to the place where you are measuring in terms of the same pH conductivity and heavy metal concentration. If the place is say 50 meters away, 100 meters away, what is the difference in that, and how is vehicular pollution density and all that? That all may come in, but this is a feasible question that you all can work on. What is the impact of eutrophication in whichever lake you talk about, or a river or anything, on water quality of this? But when you mention the pH, BOD, or DO, or fertilizers, etc., when you specify it, the impact of fertilizers, the impact of NPK on the eutrophication of this particular lake, when you modify the language in this question, when you modify the language, when you specify the variables that you're going to measure, this is a possible one. So I purposefully made these questions like that, so you can see that there is a lot of scope for modifying these questions and make it more suitable for people. How does various concentrations of acidified water affect the germination of seeds? You can choose any seeds. Now, this is something which I found in thinking. We have in thinking membership. When I go to that, this is something which is very interesting. There are two questions. One talks about acid rain. One talks about acidified water. You are not creating acid rain, right? So what generally people write is, how does acid rain impact the effect of germination? What is the impact of acid rain on the germination of seeds? You are not creating acid rain. So you cannot say acid rain in your question, right? You are creating a condition where you are creating acidified water with different concentrations and try to measure the impact on the germination of the seeds. So if you formulate a sentence like that, if you make a sentence like question, how does various concentration of acidified water affect the germination of dash seeds, or maize seeds, or whichever seeds that you are talking, or corn seeds, or whatever it is, it might make this a very good question. And it gives a lot of very simple question, very simple work which can be done in the laboratory, sitting at home, children can do it, and it's possible. How does the environment values taught in school affect the usage of plastics by the school community? What values are we talking about? That is your context you're going to talk about. That's your context. When you're talking about context on environmental issues, environmental values, talk about a community. Like in India, you talk about a Bishnoi community or any other community that we're talking about, and see how their thing and how it impacts the environment of that particular area. And go back to your local area in your school. Do we teach environment values in the school? If you teach it, how does it impact? Are you going by a survey method? So just work on that. It's a very good question, actually, if you can do a survey-based study. Complex, but possible. To what extent does the GDP of a country influences its ecological footprint, or in other words, how the economic growth related to environmental impact? Think about it. This is one of the annotated works from IB ESS, which comes as a sample. The student wanted to do something and got confused, as I said, what if any sort of situation. To what extent does GDP of a country influences its ecological footprint? You can put a country name there. That's it. That's your question. But the student need not put in, or in other words, how the economic growth is related to environmental impact. The child actually gone straight. It's completely vague and broad, and it doesn't make any sense. When you look at a research question, the child straight away lost marks on this research question. So think about it. It's easy to make the question more complex, to make it more attractive, but at the same time, you lost the focus that what you wanted to do. Now, this is from the annotated work. Very, very simple question, very simple survey, but it scored a 27. What is the relationship between age and environmental value systems in Riyadh? I know it's again from IB sources, but think about it. Very, very simple survey. At random age group, random survey, 10 questions on environmental value systems and awareness. And it scored a 27. I mean, what is so complex about this question? Nothing. Very, very simple. No one talks about lab analysis. No one talks about field studies. No one talks about soil analysis. No one talks about complex formulas to be put in. It is just survey, compiling the questions, make 4 graphs, and do your argument right. That's it. And it scored a 27. So it's not difficult to score in ESSIA, but what matters is what kind of RQ are we looking at? That's more important, right? Guru, can we look at the questions on RQ, please?
Sir, you want me to show, sir?
Yeah. You can address them or I can address them, no issues.
Sir, you go, sir. You go, sir.
Okay, where is the questions? Are you sharing your screen to show me the questions?
Yes, sir. 1 minute, sir. 1 minute. So you close your screen, sir. I'll show them.
Okay.
It's on the Padlet session, sir, so I have to show the screen. So also we go at the final, still teachers are typing the question.
Okay, it's good. So we can do that.
Yes.
It will go a little fast, but I just wanted to make sure that they're clear on this criterion because I'm not sure. Can you ask the teachers, are they okay with this? Because
yes, teachers, any doubt before we go for the next criteria? Teachers, any doubt on the context and the planning before we go for planning?
Are you guys okay with the content or you want to modify something? Are you guys clear? Are you able to?
I think they're all, so they're all best
example. Up till now. It's good.
Okay, thank you. Let's talk about planning now. Now, this is the second most important aspect, right? Again, as I said, I'm not going into the criterion. This all of you can see. You all have this criterion with you from ESS guide, and I took only 5 and 6. A repeatable method appropriate to research question. Now, repeatable method does not mean that you have to repeat the same thing again and again. You should be able to get the data. It's possible that you did in a particular country, you did a survey in your community. Can the survey be repeatable to another community if you want to do? Or it is only restricted to that community? Or the data that you got 5, 6 sets of data. So it's not like you need to get the same data again and again because laboratory conditions will change. You will not get the same data, but can you use the method again? Or it's only one time only method sort of thing, which you cannot repeat. That is something, which is very clearly mentioned even in the criteria. A repeatable method does not mean that, it has to produce the same data. It could be any data, but as long as you can replicate the same method somewhere else and get some data, it's perfectly fine. And sufficient and relevant data, that's more important. I'm going to talk about data sets. We're going to talk about it. Choice of sampling strategy. Why did you do this survey? Or why did you choose this particular strategy of surveying only in this particular age group of people? Or why did you take only pH and DO, and why didn't you take the COD or BOD studies in that? So your entire sample, and why did you choose certain points on this particular lake or river that you are talking about? You choose a particular part where, say, there's a lot of pollution happening through domestic discharge or industrial waste. That is the effluent outlet coming in, and you took that as your sampling point. And the another point you put downstream, where the water is relatively clean and pristine, you take from there. One you took upstream. But you should be able to justify your strategy, why you did those 3 and why didn't you do everything next to each other. So your sampling strategy, whatever you adopt, make sure that why did you choose this particular road to study your vehicles? Why not some other road? Why not this particular point? So sampling strategy is very important. And risk assessment and ethical considerations, it's part of the policy of IB, and it's a mandatory component in any subject. Let's look at planning aspects. As I said, repeatable method. Remember one thing. This is one of the biggest mistakes that we all feel compelled to put variables. We all want to put variables. One variable is more than enough actually if you want to do it. Variables in the actual IB guide, it generally says that variables are not necessary as long as you identify them and you do not justify the whole variables. And what children do is up to 100 to 200 words, they just waste on variables at times. So it's optional to write about variables. When you talk about a survey, how many variables will you do? What is your variable? How much your dependent variable may be your age, structure, and everything. What is your independent variable out there? So variables are not necessary. It's optional, but good to do if you are doing a lab study, because that actually gives an idea for the students also, which concentrations and what they are changing. What are things that they can modify and manipulate, and manipulation is one of the greatest skills in doing IS. So they need to understand that. Justify your strategy, as I said. Which strategy are you adopting? Why do you want to do this particular study? Or what strategy? Why do you want this particular sampling in this particular manner that you want to do? Why did you choose this particular location only? So justify your strategy, what you want to do. And why in particular depth? Why not much deeper, or why not in the surface? Why so much distance sort of thing? The minimum 5 repeats. That's what is a best fit approach again. When you talk about 5 repeats of the data, when you do your when you do your graphs, when you do your scatter graph, when you do your bar charts or anything, 5 sets of data gives you a very clear indication of which way your data is heading in terms of your standard deviation, in terms of the data errors or anything that you look at it. Minimum 5 sets of data is good because it's always possible that, 2 and 2 would be same and one is the anomaly that you find it. So it's always good to do 5 repeats, and it's generally advised by the chief examiners also that you need to have at least 5 repeats is good if you do it. Surveys must have minimum of 6 to 10 questions you need to have, because age, name, location of stay, all they are not your questions, but your questions is actually to the subject and the research question and the environmental issue you are talking about. So don't make minimum 6 questions, 6 to 10. This is just a ballpark figure. I'm not saying that it's a standard thing that you need to do, but as an environmental science teacher or someone who is looking at a lot of surveys from time to time, a minimum 6 to 10 questions is always good when you do a survey. And it's good to add your survey questionnaire. Although appendix does not carry any marks, it is just a reference point, a screenshot of your survey in the main text if possible. Why I'm saying this is it's not counted in your word count. Put it in the main text or use it in the appendix. Main text at least gives the examiner an idea that what kind of survey did you use. And one of the biggest problems that children do is they take screenshots of Google Sheets. They use Google survey forms or anything, or the data that comes, and they just take a screenshot and put it up there. And it's not legible.
Teachers, please mute yourself.
It's okay. So those questions, 6 to 10 questions minimum, and keep your survey questions there in the thing, and use your raw data. And interview at least 20 to 30 survey sets. It's much easier for you to do comparison, because survey, it's very easy to go, okay, I'll do only these 10 people. Okay, fine. But I should not be saying this, but when it comes to data manipulation and stuff like that, I see that some students do make up their own surveys. They do interview 10 people and they put 10 on their own. It happens. So we got to be a little mindful about authenticity of the data. And also 20 to 30 survey sets is always good, because that gives you a very good data sets and the range to look at when you are plotting your pie charts or any graphs or anything like that. Now, verify the reliability and validity of the secondary data. Someone going to Quora and taking data, and I see sometimes I read the bibliography where they got the data from. It says from Quora.com or some blog or gurumantra.com sort of thing. So how do you verify the reliability and validity of the data? Secondary data, right? So maybe gurumantra.com may be, something which is more reliable because it is from other secondary data. But I'm just saying, you take a UN data, it's fine. World statistics is fine. Global ecological footprints is fine. There are a lot of reliable sites, right? Don't encourage your children when they write in bibliography, Quora.com or someone's blog.com. So those are not reliable and validity of the secondary. You've got to be very mindful where the data is coming from. There's a lot of conspiracy theories out there, and you try to bring in those conspiracy theories into your data and say, oh, this is my secondary data, I'm going to compare this, and the population control policy in UP is going to control the whole India's population by 10% in the next 10 years if you have a 2-child policy in UP, and take some data from somewhere which is not reliable from a particular website, which is a propagandist sort of thing. Don't do that kind of thing. It's not required. You got to go into the reliability and validity of the data. That's very important for the examiners when they look at it. And also make sure that you cite the data from where it comes in, below the tables if possible. Otherwise, it might end up as plagiarism at a later stage, and the whole IA might go for a no credit. Safety and ethical considerations, as I said, they must be mentioned, and these include the privacy issues for surveys. A lot of times we talk about safety and ethical issues. There are a lot of privacy issues. Sometimes you need to mention that the privacy of the people is guarded, and you talk about sex-gender ratio, or you talk about certain economic situations, socio-economic backgrounds or anything. People may not want their names to be listed on the survey questionnaires or something like that. So you got to mention it very clearly, and privacy issues are taken into consideration when you're doing your surveys. So safety and ethical considerations become mandatory when you do your planning part. Okay. That's for planning. Planning is not big, but planning is something, which matters about your variables. If you are mentioning your variables, be clear. Identify your strategy, the strategy that you are going to follow, and justify your strategy. Go for a validated method, and a very validated method, which is well-established method, and don't come across a method which your child designed by themselves and want to do it, because the data that is going to come out after that, and you're going to compare that data with the global context, your data might vary. So just please remember that. And especially whatever you're using in the method when you're writing, use SI units only. You will use only SI units and not any other units. You won't mention foot ending sort of thing, or things like that, and or a pounds sort of thing in the weight or anything that you are doing. And the concentrations is very important. You cannot say varying concentrations of acids for creating acidified water. You mention the amount of concentration that you are going to do in your method. What are the concentrations that you are looking at? So there are certain data values and data labels are very important along with units, even in your planning stage. So please might be mindful that what you do in the planning. So this is what is going to set stage for your next part, which is research, analysis, and conclusion. So Guru asked me to go a little fast, so I'm just going a little fast.
Okay.
Okay. Research, analysis, and conclusion. Again, same thing from the guide. You all know that. You talk about diagrams, you got about charts and graphs. Analysis of the data completely so that all relevant patterns are displayed. Interpret trends, patterns, and relationships. One of the biggest mistakes done here by the people is where they put the data, where they actually add the data, what kind of charts and graphs to choose, and where they end up with the conclusion. So let's discuss about that. I mean, it's really exciting. Sometimes when you look at some of the case studies, some of the IAS, this is one area where everything is mixed up and you don't know where to fix what, but at the same time, you got to follow the best fit approach as an examiner. Yes, research. The quantity and the quality of data, when you do secondary data, sometimes you tend to put in pages and pages and pages of data. 185 countries, 195 countries data about population. You don't need that much. Just take similar, group them into different category and put them in the particular range and use it. So the quantity and the quality of data is very important. What is the quality of the data? No one is worried about the quality of the data, quantity of the data, as long as you have 5 data sets or your 10 data sets that are available, but not beyond that. Don't put charts and charts and charts and just to show that the data is existing. Qualitative data only where relevant to RQ. Remember that. Beyond the numericals, beyond the numbers, anything that you're talking about, try to link it back to your RQ in terms of your data that you have. Otherwise, what will happen, when you don't do that, you tend to miss out on certain key aspects of your data in that entire, clutter that we make with data. And we always used to. I mean, as a student, I used to feel that as much of data you put in, you get so many marks. That's what, and I used to do 5 studies and then I used to put 8 data in that. My own data used to go into my sciences, chemistry labs. So it's possible. So just be mindful about all those things. This is the biggest mistake done by people. People think there's too much of raw data. We don't want to put it here. We want to put everything in the appendix. Please remember, students cannot score more than a 3 or 4 if there is no raw data in the main body of the text. Appendix is not counted in marking. So raw data is essential. It should be, the raw data doesn't mean that it doesn't have, if it is 3 pages, don't worry about raw data. But data is must. In survey, when you say interviewed so many people responded, there's yes, no, points, whatever criteria you follow on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 to 10, whatever you do, put everything into the main text. It's not part of your word count. Label it as raw data and use it. You get your full 6 marks. But if you don't put raw data, many students in this particular criteria lose marks because they just put the data there and they just only use the process data in the main text to make it look attractive. Well, making it looking attractive is not the main objective here. No graphs, charts without raw data. Remember that. Sometimes, as I said, children plot the graph on a Google sheet, plot the graph, choose the option, cut the graph, paste it there. Where is the data? How you as a teacher also in your own class, how do you know where did the data come from? So any graph or chart made on the sheet or IA need to have your raw data. Don't do it without raw data. And don't encourage children to do it. Online surveys, as I said, whatever they do, online surveys and summary, the font size is too small. Try to, make it legible for people when they do it, because at least for the examiner to connect what the children read. It's important. Accuracy in calculations, units, graphs, titles, axis labels, appropriate graphing techniques, and consistency in decimal places is very important. You can't say at one place 23.6 and at one place you can't say 23.06 or 23.60. So if you stick to one decimal place, stick to that throughout the table or the entire study. Don't keep changing it at different points in your data points. I'm sorry, I'm saying you don't do it. What I meant to say is, you don't let your students do it. It's a habit, just when you talk to students, you just talk about them not doing it. Graphs and titles, yeah. This is where again you lose marks if you don't have access labels in the communication part. That's 3 marks. Actually, it's a bonus, Students can get those 3 marks straight away without doing much effort. But as long as they follow the structure and they follow these basic things. Units must, even on the graph, when you put x-axis, y-axis, DO, milliliters per liter, whatever it is, you just put it there. On that, the number of ppm on the side or centimeters, whatever you want to put in. Title should be there for the graph, and axis labels. Many people at times, they forget the x-axis label. They write the x-axis label and they forget the y-axis label when they put it. Those labels actually in annotation, they'll come up and they lose marks. So please be mindful that these are very important, and you cannot score a 6 even if one part of this is missing in your thing if you are using any of this kind of data. Evidence of processing the data. It's very important. And the tools that you use are also very important. So what did you use in terms of your processing your data? You don't need to show the entire calculation. Use the formula that you put in. One sample calculation, show it. And then apply it to the whole thing. IB is not expecting you to put the entire your processing calculation, 40 different steps of how did you calculate your Spearman's coefficient. They are not asking it. Put in your formula, do one sample, and then you can go ahead with that. Complexity in analysis does not get more marks. Remember that. You just try to, for something which could be easily done with a bar chart, bar graph, you go into Spearman and Pearson and chi-square and all those things. You were making it more and more complex to make it, you think that you make it more marks. It doesn't. As I told you, a 27-1 is just a bar chart and nothing else. So complexity does not get you marks. Just make sure that whatever you're doing is clear and relevant. What is applicable where? This is all analysis. You see the different colors. The black is research, and then you find a different color for analysis and different color for conclusion in the text. So it's easy for you to interpret. Most common techniques. Easiest ones, mean, average, standard deviation, diversity index is very easy. Then you do Pearson's and Spearman's. Tabulation with appropriate titles is must. If there is an anomaly in your data, as I said, 5 data sets, one data is going on the scatter graph and it's going off the chart. Doesn't matter. Don't get bugged up with that, and don't run 20 different sets again. Just explain the anomaly, why the anomaly occurred. That's it. That's more than enough. Full calculations not mandatory, but specify your calculation, which one you used with the formula. All surveys must include your tabulated responses, raw data, questionnaire example. As I said, questionnaire, screenshot here or in appendix doesn't matter, but make sure that your data is there. Raw data is must. Conclusion. Your conclusion cannot be different from your analysis. You cannot talk something different from that of analysis. Your conclusion should be derived from your analysis. Doesn't mean that you thought of something at the time of your context and research question. Your analysis did not prove it. So don't change your conclusion based on that on your research on your environmental issue and context. Your conclusion must follow your analysis. Conclusion may be right or wrong. You may have reached your conclusion or not, doesn't matter. But just follow what is there. Clear subheadings, clear titles. People mix up conclusion with discussion in most places, and that leads to loss of marks. Remember that. You should connect with the RQ when you do it. Your conclusion should have reference to your research question and environmental issue. That is where your marks come in. Conclusion without connecting back to your RQ, you lose your marks. Out of 2, you may get 1 on conclusion part if you divide the whole thing into 2 to 2. So remember that. Whatever data is presented, even if there's anomaly, don't worry. But just relate it to the data. As I said, don't stray away from your data. What is on your data is that's your basic data that you need to follow. If conclusion is not agreeing with RQ, it's possible. Discuss the reasons in discussion and evaluation. And that's important. Don't try to change the entire study because of that. So these are 3 different aspects. And remember, many people think that conclusion should come in the end. They do it after discussion. But when you are doing analysis, you are already discussing your data a bit. But don't do elaborate discussion on analysis. Go with discussion subtitle and there you discuss. As long as your subheadings and everything is clear, it is good for the examiner, as I said, the best fit approach to identify the areas under which criteria it comes in. Otherwise, what will happen is, all the content will be there. I mean, I cannot even blame the examiner. They are looking at 100 different sites and things, different case studies. There is a chance that your child might get a disadvantage and might miss on that point, which may get him a credit. So use these headings, do it very clearly under RAC. Then you can get your 5 or a 6 in this. Discussion and evaluation, again, as I said, you have the criteria in front of you. I'm not going through this. What do you do in discussion and evaluation? Separate your conclusion and evaluation. Do not merge. This is the biggest mistake people do, as I said. So don't merge it. Use proper headings if needed. Reference to context. Even in your discussion, in your evaluation. Remember, once you mention your context and RQ in the first section, in the context part, in CXT, when you come to DV and after this, at every stage, as much as possible, keep referring back to RQ and DI. That's important. Keep going back constantly. Or as mentioned in the RQ, this is what it is. As applicable to the environmental issue that is discussed, this is what it is. So keep going back as much as possible to this. Evaluate the conclusion in discussion. Whether your conclusion is right, wrong, closer to your hypothesis and your context or environmental issue, discuss it. Discuss it in detail. And as I said, your maximum word count should come from context and DEV. These are your maximum word content parts where actually you can justify your entire study. Remember that. Cite your secondary data from where available to support or reject your conclusion. You have a primary data which you got on eutrophication. Then you refer to, as per the established data on eutrophication on lakes across the globe or lakes in this particular lakes in India, this is the secondary data supports your primary data conclusion sort of thing. You got to connect between your secondary data if you want to refer to it and mention it in the bibliography. You don't need to present the data, but just cite it as mentioned in www.footprint.in or www.cpcb.nic.in or something like that. Evaluate. This is more important. Many children at many point and some point and they just forget this. You got to evaluate your method that you used in planning for its strengths and limits. I don't call it weaknesses normally, so I always make it limitations. The weaknesses and limitations need to be mentioned. So the method that you used, it has to be evaluated. Every method, even the most established method of DO or BOD are not foolproof, right? So what are the strengths of the method that you use? What are the limitations of the method? Is the weather bad on that day? Is there a dependable variable which change? Is there an independent variable like a climate change, rainfall or something which change your entire data? So did you not get access to children, people of age group 60 and above and you are able to do only 62 and below? That's your limitation. So, but evaluate your method for strengths and limitations. That's very important. And evaluation marks out of 6, at least 3 marks will come from this: strengths and limitations, and also the reliability of the data as a strength. You can use it. When you use your strengths, how confident are you of your data, how you collected the data, where you got the data from? That reliability of the data is your strength. So just stick to that and mention it as your strength. Highlight the limitations and how it affected the data or conclusion, and identify the source of limitation. So when you mention a limitation or weakness, it is essential to make a point that how it affected your data. Why is the anomaly out of the 5 data sets you have one set which is going off chart? That's your limitation. What happened at that particular data? Maybe the light was off. Maybe the photosynthesis effect you are trying to do, the light switched off. Maybe there was a power cut or something. Mention it. But identify the source of limitation. That shows that the child actually Yeah? Guru, you're saying something? Okay. Identify the source of limitation there and explain it. That shows your knowledge. And suggest modifications related to limitations to a method and improve the quality and reliability of the data. This is very important. What people do is they think they evaluated the method and it's done. But if you go back to the criteria, I don't know where the criteria is in front of me right now, but if you go back to the criteria of the 6 points, how you get a 6 in that, in evaluation, here, suggest modifications addressing one or more significant and further areas of research. That is your 6. You get your 6 here. The 5 and 6, the difference between 5 and a 6 and a 3 and 4 is this. Evaluation everyone will do. Can you improve, can you suggest a modification? No matter how small it is, how less significant it is, but mention a modification of your method. Mention a modification of survey. Mention a talk about, maybe I must have worded my questions differently so that more people will understand my questions. Fine, doesn't matter. It's a modification. You may get a credit for it. So the quality of the data, how you can improve, you got to give a modification there. And that does have its impact directly on your 6. Remember that. Okay? That's for discussion and evaluation. And this, as I said, should count to at least 30 to 40% of your word count in your whole thing. And this is the one crux of the whole thing, your discussion and everything, other than your conclusion coming from there. Data tables and analysis can go on without word count. A 10% of your word count might go in there and not more than that. But rest will come from here. Areas of further research should be going beyond the method followed. So this is more something which you can write it. How you can study further. How you can study further in terms of health impacts. How can the government try and do something more in your this thing? And how can you yourself as an individual can improve your area of study? Of course, these children are not going to do it anything after year 12, but you got to mention that, how you can, areas of further research can be done. You have to identify areas of further research here, and that's important. The next aspect is applications. The criterion is very simple. One potential application, at least you justify your application, discuss in the context based on the findings of the study. So what happens is, whatever you found from your conclusion, whatever you got from your conclusion, use that conclusion and apply it to real life, ecological footprint, environmental values, a campaign or awareness campaign to create more awareness about environmental values, an environmental campaign or a campaign about family planning, a campaign about reducing consumption of resources, reducing consumption of fossil fuels, a campaign about discharge of sewage or industrial effluents into this thing, or an awareness about water pollution, awareness of quality of air and water, whatever it is. A potential application to the environmental issue that you initially mentioned, whether it is vehicular pollution, water pollution, biodiversity, loss of biodiversity, ecotourism, whatever it is. Give a potential application. That's more important based on your study. And if you want a full 3 on this, Evaluate your own application. That's more important. You make a suggestion and can't say, oh, this will, we will promote ecotourism in Jim Corbett to conserve wildlife and to increase the biodiversity. That's my potential application. I'll create additional eco tracks or something in that. It's fine. But what are the strengths and weaknesses and limitations of this solution? So you got to think about strengths of it. Yes, strengths. Your vehicles can be reduced. You can do a eco track sort of thing in that and do an animal corridor and a wildlife corridor sort of situation. But what is the weakness of it? Can you do it? What is the potential threats to it, to the species or to your own safety? What are the limitations of this? So think about strengths, weaknesses, and limitations of your own solution, and then you have to write it. If you need a 3 on that, just by mentioning an application, you may get a 1. By justifying your application, you will get 2. But if you evaluate it, you will go into your full 3. Remember that. Now, same thing. The same thing I just put in different points here. The applications and solutions, what you saw. Whatever I said, it's the same thing here. You can see that justification and evaluation. Communication. This is, again, from the IB, it's very clear in the guide, structured and well organized, consistent use of appropriate terminology, and the report is logical and coherent. It's important. But what you need to do is easy to understand, a structured presentation. Use the context, research question. So you don't need to write a hypothesis. If you're doing a comparison of different variables, yes, you talk about null hypothesis and the hypothesis, it's fine. But make sure that you're in order. Context, RQ, planning, methodology, ethical issue, variables if you're writing about or although it's not required. The risk assessments, risk and environmental impacts of that, or ethical considerations, and go back into your RAC research, raw data, data analysis, then you go into graphs and figures after that, and then talk about your conclusion, then go into your discussion. I think I'm getting this right order, I'm not sure. Discussion, then go into your evaluation. And then talk about your application. It's a very clear structure. First, make the structure and use the subheadings immediately. And then under the subheadings, you keep writing whatever you want. Just structured presentation. Clear headings and subheadings, what you want to do. It's very important that you do it. Headings and subheadings. Appropriate usage of images and graphs. Don't talk about something that, you're talking about global warming in India and don't put the worldwide picture of, with a picture with different color coding of red here, blue here, and purple there, and amber there. Don't do that. If you're talking about India condition, use the Indian picture only. If you're talking about a global context, talk about global context. If you want to do a pie chart, do a pie chart, enough. Don't just use images just for the sake of doing images, pumping from all over the place, 20 different images of Gurgaon and say, this is Gurgaon. And I want to do a Google satellite image of Gurgaon, a local image of Gurgaon, a slum area of Gurgaon. Don't do all that. Just appropriate usage of images. Connections within RAC and DEV. This is what I said, your maximum word count. This is your communication part, how you are justifying it. It's important. So stick to this. As I said, no need to write the entire analysis of every data. Just use the formula and then add on. Use the formula, show one sample calculation for analysis, and then put in a table with your final calculation using this. No credit to appendix. Remember that. You will not get any credit to appendix. You may have 10 appendix points, but no one is going to give you credit. It's only just to validate your data for the examiner if you talk about a survey. Bibliography, MLA citation is advised, but not must. What is it, bot? Anyway, but it's not must. Bibliography is advised, it's must to avoid your plagiarism because certain methods you are adopting, although it's a survey, you will use certain calculation formulas from somewhere, you will use some Google Sheets to calculate, or you will use a calculator sheet from somewhere to input the data and get the graphs out and stuff like that. Try to use bibliography in terms of global context that you are talking about or the local context. Although it doesn't carry any weight in terms of your marking, but definitely will avoid plagiarism in case if you have something mentioned there in terms of your citations. So that is something that we need to look at. So this is about the criteria that we are going to talk about. Now, the general do's and don'ts, the very basic things, not more than 20 to 50. Golden rule. Do not stray from your environmental issue and argue. Don't try to be very adventurous. Just stick to your environmental issue, stick to your research question. The idea is to be very concise and not very descriptive. The moment you get into descriptive, you lose your word count. And after that, once you do it, then it's very difficult where to cut and what to put and where. So just stick to this. You can actually, for a guidance to the students, you can give your limited word count. Okay, 1,000 words for this DEV or 1,200 words for DEV, 500 words for data analysis. I know 600 words for your context. You can just give them a rough figure just to work on it. Appropriate use of scientific terms and units. It's must. SI units only. Cite your sources to avoid plagiarism. Okay, these are some of the things that you guys should not be doing. So that's about the criterion. I know I went a little fast, but we are recording the whole thing. I think Guru will share it with you. I understand the time constraint that we have. We have 5 minutes to go, but I just wanted to talk about certain research questions which can get you a potential high score if you're working on it. To what extent does decaying organic matter contribute to decreasing DO in lake, dissolved oxygen in lake, whatever name it is, contributing to eutrophication? Very focused, straight question, right? Easy to work. Decaying organic matter, you're not specifying anything, vegetable waste or human waste or anything. Just mention it. What is the impact of individual practices, whether you talk about import of transport practices or, consumption practices or solid waste, municipal waste, fossil fuels in dash and dash locality on the quality of air, water, soil in which area. So you fill in whatever you want, but try to frame in this. This is just a frame. It's just a framework for you. You can use whatever you want and you can use these ones. These are very focused RQs that you can look at it. You can talk about impact of agricultural practices, impact of tourism, impact of urbanization, impact of these on the loss of biodiversity. So you can always work on these ones. It's very easy to work on. Secondary data, a lot of secondary data available for each and every one of you on this. To what extent does that? I saw a question on the chat. I wanted to respond, but I did not say much. I just said only one word. You are talking about policies. This is what you can talk about. There's enough data on this. To what extent does the Air Act help in control of vehicular pollution or the industrial pollution or the concentration of sulfur dioxide or nitrous oxide, anything that you want to put in, or particulates on a particular species or affect the control of biodiversity or the health impact or anything that we're talking about. So the policies you can talk about, no issues. You have a policy to refer back to. The Air Act is there, the Water Act is there, Forest Act is there, Environment Act is there, Wildlife Act, population policies are there. So anything you can pick it up. What is the impact of one-child policy in China on its national economy? Or does it have any impact on its national economy in terms of its overall population numbers? Or does it have any impact on its ecological footprint? We don't know, right? If you have the secondary data, go ahead, do it. You can always use a policy, and it will be an adventure. I've never seen someone doing this with a policy, but when I was thinking about what you guys have written in the discussion, it's really interesting. Actually, we have enough data on this. The CPCB has enough data on the air pollution, on the water pollution, on the forests, on the wildlife. We have enough data. Actually, you can get the secondary data from there at this point when you are in lockdown and quarantine. Best way to do is take up a policy, and you can get a lot of data on it, including graphs. Work on it. The other one is correlate between the growth in GDP with the consumption of resources. Again, you will have a lot of data coming in from resources or fossil fuels. You can use anything that you want. It's just a framework that I'm giving you here. Correlation between mortality, rising health costs, and growing air pollution in a particular country or countries. This is the data available on world statistics. Take it from anywhere, any country. Don't go into population pyramids. Talk about mortality rates, talk about birth rates, talk about their expenditure on health costs. And it will be a very good secondary data usage to make a very good study if you want to in terms of your studies. So that's what is possible. These are just some questions. If you have any doubts, you can always put it on the chat and we can talk about it. One of the most critical aspects, and I personally find it very difficult to do, but I know many of you might be having this kind of issue, statistical analysis. We have some problems at times, what to do with statistical analysis and what kind of statistical analysis that we should apply. As I said, basic mean, average, standard deviation is more than enough, other than the couple of coefficients you want to do it. There are calculators to do your standard deviation. Your children can actually use these calculators than trying to work out all the formulas and everything. I have put in 2 links, YouTube links, where you know how to plot a chart with errors graphs and all that. And the different things that we do in terms of your correlations, your average, range, means, frequencies and counts and everything. You use chi-squared when you are using frequencies and counts, and measurements, mostly graphs. You try to work on range when you're talking about surveys, average and mean. So generally this happens, but these are the sites. Actually, you can straight away log into these things. Children just can log into this particular link, put in the data, that the answer will come straight away. So they just need to put in the formula, input their variables, and they get the answer straight on the chi-square. So you do chi-square data when you are looking at, what did you observe and what did you expect? Is there a correlation? Is there a deviation? So this kind of data will definitely help you. Pearson correlation, again, it's mostly the additional data that you look at it. And again, this particular formula on socialsciencestatistics.com, you can actually log into that. Every calculation that you want to do, the formulas are available. It's easy for children. You know that they are not good in math. Most of them might be doing math, AISL or whatever it is, AISL. But this thing will help them without struggling to get what they want. Based on the data, then they can go and plot their graphs. Spearman's also, social science statistics, you can get your data from there. No issue at all. Positive and negative correlation between 2 variables. You want to do it, you do Spearman's and go on to a graph, plot it out there. But again, calculation is very easy using this formula. Okay, so use them. The recording will come to you, everything will be there, or I can send you a direct presentation instead of a recording. It's much easier for some of you if you want to do it. But yes, this will really help you guys if you are looking at it. And I said, there are some sites, those who are examiners, you have your training modules there, you can use it. In Thinking is something, if your school can subscribe to it, nothing like that. It's a very good resource for your environmental systems. IB guide is there. Sometimes it's a little confusing for the new teachers. And my students, I use some of their case studies to do it. But what I would say is, if any of you who have more than 2 years of experience in teaching ESS, try to become an examiner. Try to become an examiner. Being an examiner is the best professional development that you can get as an environmental science teacher. You understand so much about the subject and the evaluation criteria and how to teach and how best help your children to get the maximum score that they deserve. Okay, so that's all from my side. Unless you want to do 1 or 2 exemplars, I don't know, we are on time, we crossed the time. So I'm closing my presentation. Guru, you can take over, and if you want to see 1 or 2 exemplars, then I can put it up. Otherwise, that's all from my side. Any question and answers? Quick
questions, sir. We have questions.
Sure, then we can do it.
So can I open the Padlet, sir? So these are some.
Are you guys clear on this, or is it too fast for you guys? I was just wondering. I know 1.5 hours is too short a time actually to go through all this. In fact, each criteria requires 1 hour actually if you want to do it much in depth in terms of exemplars and everything. It does take time. It does take time. But at least if you get some idea, or if you have at least some idea about how to apply the criteria, that will be very good from the session. Yeah.
Teachers, before I go.
Yeah, Guru, you are sharing something?
No, sir. Teachers, any doubt, any feedback before we go? I hope it's an extremely informative presentation, sir, actually. Even I cannot do this kind of thing. Sir, I know actually you are very busy. After Narendra Modi, you are the busiest person on the planet. But
that means I have no work. What you are trying to say is I don't do any work and I'm just sitting and relaxing, right?
On your busy schedule, you are coming and this kind of 1.5 hours. We also you can see on the
that
chat
means
box.
I'm not doing anything, bro.
So no, sir. You can see on the chat box all the teachers. It was an excellent, fantastic session. Teachers, you have any doubts, teachers? This is a rare chance to ask you, Arvind sir, before we go for parallel session. Any doubts?
Guru sir, can I go ahead?
Yes, madam. Yes, Archana.
Yeah. So I just want from Mr. Chalasani, how you persuade your students to go back from descriptive thing to evaluative thing. I struggled last batch. All of them said, okay, we have finished survey. I have described it. I have given the survey report there. But there is no evaluation. I couldn't convince them. They were so headstrong. I couldn't do that. How do you do that?
See, it depends. You know, when you initial discussions when you are having, it's not just a survey. You know, it's good to find what is the topic of interest in the first place. When they do the survey, when they have the data, it depends on how you want to do the evaluation of it. As you say, just as I said, for a survey, you can do a bar chart and a pie chart and it's done. But when you evaluate the data, as I said, if it is related to your syllabus area, what you are teaching in the class, it's much easier for the students to connect than trying to do something which is not there in the syllabus and trying to bring it in. As long as you link it with what you are doing in your class, in my opinion, when I do it, I try to bring it back. Okay, you talk about environmental values. Let's talk about the environmental values that we discussed in that. What are those ones? Does your questionnaire reflect your environmental values? We talk about awareness about pollution. What are the different aspects and health impacts you're talking? Does it bring in that kind of impact? Does your questions reflect that? When you know that, they are able to apply their knowledge into their evaluation part. Otherwise, they will not be able to do it. And also, as I said, it's always good to show a couple of exemplars to the students, always to show how the evaluation works.
Great, sir. Sir, we have one more doubt.
Is it clear, Archana, or you want to have a discussion on that?
Yeah, needed discussion because students do not understand. I mean, not understand. They understand, but just because of they're lazy, they don't want to do it. I have done so much, ma'am. I have written this line is evaluation, ma'am. And that particular line, I said there is no heading. So that line is cut.
Sometimes you got to be blunt. As a teacher, I'm telling you, you got to be very blunt. I just tell them, if you don't get this 25% weightage marks in this, you're going to fail the subject. Because your theory is anyways not, you don't know how the paper is going to be, you don't know how the exam is going to be, and you don't know whether you'll pass in the exam or not. At least this 25%, if you can score it, you better get your grade and that's how you pass. And sometimes you got to be very blunt with them to push them, to make them get their diploma. I know, as I said in the beginning, they are not students actually who are doing out of their interest. They are being pushed into it at times. They get lazy. But you got to put the facts in front of them and say, this 30% weightage or 25% weightage, if it is some one thing which is going to bring you a 3 or a 4 in your overall ESS, just put it in front of them. If you have to pass, you better do this. I mean, that's a very harsh way of putting it, but you got to tell them.
Yeah, we need to tell
them.
Thank you.
Sir, we have Sri Lakshmi, madam, sir. Okay, it's a very privileged, ma'am. Ma'am, you go ahead, ma'am.
Guru sir, my voice is not clear. I have put down the chat.
Okay.
My question.
Sir, madam, sir, having focus on natural science as well as human science approach in the IA, even when it is lab work.
Not required, ma'am. See, it depends on which way. See, you can connect it to natural sciences and human sciences approach. There is no specific guideline that which approach you need to take. As long as it connects to one environmental issue. Environmental issue does not mean that we're only talking about pollution. You're talking about human sciences approach in terms of population, socioeconomics, or anything of that sort. You can go into natural sciences, into biodiversity and photosynthesis and transpiration, anything that you want on the other side. But there is no what you call mandated approach to an IA. You can use any approach you want as long as an environmental issue is connected to it. That's the main aspect in this.
So, but for EE and ESS,
Yes.
it is mandatory that both have to come in an extended essay. I put in.
Thank you, brother.
She is asking how.
Yes, for extended essay, actually depends on your area of interest. Which particular essay they are doing, which particular topic they are doing. It's based on that. And when we do the extended essay session, we will discuss that in detail. But yes, in extended essay, depending on your approach, either you stick to one approach, you don't mix approaches in extended essay. Because the moment you mix it, you are confusing the student also and the examiner also, and it will end conclusion in extended essay when you are going towards the end of it. The student is totally confused, and your conclusion might not support your natural sciences approach or your human sciences approach. So better to stick to one approach, and that will make your study very easy when you are doing extended essays.
So we have 3 more teachers. Neela, madam, go ahead, madam. Neela, madam.
Hi, good evening, sir. So we know the ESS kids are not very good with mathematics. So I end up taking statistics class for them, teaching them the t-test, ANOVA test, regression analysis. It's an every year affair that I have to do with them. How have you encountered with this problem? I mean, do you take lessons for statistics with them, or do you leave it to them to kind of go and speak to the mathematics teachers? That's my first question. And my second question is, are the lab experiments better than the field work? Are they more valued than the field work in ESS?
Coming to your first part in terms of statistics, as I said, I'm not good at math, so I also struggle with that. But we don't do a separate statistics class or anything for them, ma'am. Depending on the topic that they chose, depending on the calculations that they require, and as I said, there are calculators in place, and I do seek help from my math teachers. And these students, I guide them to the math teacher, in terms of particular calculation to understand it from them. Then me trying to, I give them a basic idea of what it is about and how you do it. But if they're confused about calculations, I do send them to my math teachers, and they willingly help in doing the statistics part with them. That particular aspect in how to do the calculation, what is the variable, what is your x and what is your n and which value to put in, and all that, those things I explain to them. But calculation, representation in terms of graphing, the math teachers willingly step in there, and I take their help. I don't do a separate statistics class because I know that I will not be able to do justice to them, just because I think that I know the formula. It doesn't work like that. And when it comes to the lab experiments with the matter, actually, whether you do a lab or a field. When you do something on the field, the child is getting more exposure. But the same thing, you collect some soil sample, come back to the lab and do the analysis here. It is also sort of field work. So there is no preference that what is better, whether you do a lab work or field work, as long as your environmental issue is addressed in both contexts.
Right, sir. Thank you.
We have 2 more teachers. Gaurav sir, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, hello, sir. First of all, it was an excellent presentation. Thank you so much, sir. So my question is regarding the secondary data. So I was a bit concerned, if we are going with secondary data, so is it okay to look at a single point source, or is it good enough to go with the multiple data sources, whenever we are working on secondary data? So, if we are inclined towards single point source, would that be a sort of a reliable thing, or if we consider multiple sources, would that be good enough in terms of secondary data?
See, secondary data, when you are using it, like you're doing a population study, you're doing world statistics or something like that, right? So stick to one particular source, because different countries, different names, anything that you're getting, it's better that you stick to one particular source than using 2 different sources, because there will be variation in the data that will affect your conclusion in the end. So throughout the IA, just try to stick to one particular source of data as far as your secondary data is concerned. And if you feel that there is another source which is valuable and which is reliable as well, as I mentioned in the conclusion, in support to the secondary data that you used, as mentioned by the United Nations site and whatever it is, it also agrees with the conclusion that I derived by using the data from this particular site. You can just make a mention of it, but try to stick to one particular source for all the parameters that you are using. You change the parameters, you change different sources, your data will go haywire on that, and you won't get a reliable data.
Okay, thank you so much, sir.
So we have one more teacher. Rupa, madam, go ahead, madam.
Sir, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. Sir, I just want to know if a student is using any kind of probe instead of a digital device. For example, if the student is using pH probe instead of a digital pH meter, will the student be penalized because he is showing more machine dependency, or it will be treated equally, or like what is the status for that?
It doesn't matter, ma'am, whether you do a typical titration or a litmus paper test, or you use a probe, or you use anything else, or pH meter, because your data is coming in your methodology. You are clearly mentioning that you are using vernier probe for pH, and that's it. As long as your methodology are using a probe, it's fine. It doesn't matter whether someone who's using a pH meter gets more credit or using a litmus paper is getting more credit. There is nothing like that. But the data from the probe, and that's another thing I was saying earlier, the data from the probe, when it comes and the children download the data and they present it as a screenshot. And that is something is better to avoid, and try to create a table by themselves and write pH data, and this is than just trying to copy the exact thing, the screenshot that is coming from the probe data and trying to put it in there. It's better to do it manually as far as the table is concerned, because sometimes the data that comes, that are not legible at all, because it's very small font and everything. And that is where children lose marks, not because of using a probe. A probe is a scientifically proven method, and it's more accurate and it's valid and approved everywhere. There's no disadvantage of using a probe.
Thank you, sir. So, one more teacher. Kalpana, madam, please go ahead, madam.
Hello, good evening, sir. Thank you for this wonderful presentation, sir. I am a first-year teacher for ESS. So in the first batch of IA students, I encountered this particular, this lockdown and everything. So the question that most often came was 2020, because one of the IAs was on vehicular pollution in Delhi. So 2020, do we disregard it in the secondary data sources because vehicular pollution, certainly went down? How do I answer? I mean, do we really disregard this 2020? Like, suppose if they're taking from 2015 to 2020, 5 data sets. So how do I answer, or how do I tackle that? Because it's going to come up in the next set also. Whatever pollution sources they're looking at, this particular year is going to be a little dicey in terms of, the data that's going to come up.
Not to worry. In fact, it's nothing else. It's to your advantage, actually. When you talk about environmental issue and vehicular pollution and everything, the decrease in the number of vehicles results in the decrease in the air pollution, right? And the particulates, whether you are doing particulate or oxides of sulfur, nitrogen, whichever one you are doing in the ppm. But just remember, use it to your advantage. And that is a graph that you are going to study when you are saying, the impact of reduced vehicular emissions, reduced vehicles on the air pollution, on the air pollution status of Delhi or wherever you are using it. But this is your advantage, actually. That is your comparison at the peak when the vehicles are there, and the odd and even numbers when you started using it, and then when there is complete lockdown and the least number of vehicles. Look at the data, how the graph will change, increase in the concentration and decrease in the pollutants, and use that as your comparison. And in your conclusion, you will make that, and your application will be, implementing of reduced vehicle thing in terms of improving the air quality in Delhi. And the evidence suggests, it's very clear your evidence is there. Use that as your anchoring point, and that will be your positive thing than negative thinking that, what will I do when the vehicles are not there. That is actually a very, very positive point for a child to do a clear comparison of air pollution status pre-COVID, pre-odd even, and post-COVID sort of situation. You can do a very good comparison on that.
Thank you. Okay, good. So,
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
So now, okay, thank you, teachers. Now see, the time is going to be 7 o'clock. So still you can see 38 teachers are still there. I can see how the people are learning a lot of things. So I take this opportunity first to thank you to Arvind sir. Teachers, please note, when I was thinking first ESS talk, the first person came to mind is Arvind sir. But what you have seen, Arvind sir, is only a 10%, because I have closely worked, and you have to really see Arvind sir giving the feedback. Because everyone asking their higher feedback, but where I should go and ask, the only person I always ask the feedback is Arvind sir, because he is a Lord Vishnu, Lord Shiva for me. Whenever I have something, I will go and ask him only. Okay, I cannot ask anyone. That is the reason why I called him. And said, teachers, please note, when I first called him, he didn't say no at all. I said, yes, Guru, good, I'm coming. Now he is here and explained each and everything. Take for example, for this year particular batch, okay, he is one of the reason why I got a lot of 7 in IA. He was the one, because I always check in my own view. But when I given my IA, he has given an excellent feedback. Okay, someone really have to see how to give a feedback. Even I have learned from the Arvind sir. So Arvind sir, thank you very much. We have some teachers who out of times. So may I request for Shubha madam? Shubha madam, please share your experience, and then I'll go with Bhavana madam. Shubha madam, are you there? Madam,
Hi, yeah, I'm there. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, man, you're audible.
Yeah. I mean, this was, first of all, thank you for this wonderful session, for organizing this, Guru sir, and for inviting the expert here. I mean, of course, I myself had a privilege of working with Mr. Chalasani, but I have never heard him in academic context. It was never I got a chance. He was always talking about, of course, school policies as a school head, I'm bowled over. So first of all, thank you, Arvind sir. All of us here sitting here as ESS teachers, maybe in whatever grade or progression level we are in, like in terms of experience, we all have really, I think, must have, have takeaways at our own levels. The new ones may have really scaffolded the IB guide, which you have, were totally mapped with your presentation. And for people who are already experts, they may have their own sets of, that's so many clarifications. So I think for me, it was more of a, picking up nuances, as if like raw data should be there in the, your main report, essay, not only in appendix. And then evaluation, how to go about evaluation. All these small things, which, I've read it 1,000 times in that IB guide, but I'm hearing from you, and the way you have explained, I think this was really awesome, and would love to, as sir said, Guru sir said, would love to have more sessions with you. Thank you very much on behalf of everyone, sir.
Thank you, madam. Thank you. Now we have Bhavana madam. Bhavana madam, please go ahead. And Bhavana madam, before I go,
yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Because whenever I put something WhatsApp, you are the first person, and you are the first person registered for the ESS talk. That's why I need your feedback on this one. Yes, madam.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Guru sir. Good evening, all. I'm Ms. Bhavna, ESS teacher from Vakar Global School, Aurangabad. Good evening, sir. Arvind sir. I take this opportunity to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of all our ESS WhatsApp group teachers across India. I thank Arvind sir for giving us your valuable time to guide all of us about the IA criteria. It was really, sir, your session has definitely added to deep insight, I would say, into the topic towards IA criteria. And it was a wonderful session, sir, full of knowledge, and it was interesting. I thank Guru sir also for organizing such a wonderful, informative session for all the ESS facilitators. As I'm new to ESS, sir, this will really help us all. I also thank all the ESS teachers to attend the session. I once again thanks Arvind sir for taking out time from his busy schedule and enlightening us with the knowledge, and request Guru sir to organize more sessions for all of us. So it would be really helpful for all the ESS facilitators, sir. Thank you once again, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Arvind sir.
We have a last one. Archana madam. Archana madam, are you there, ma'am? Yes.
Yes, Guru sir, I'm there.
Please go ahead.
Good evening, all of you. This is Archana. I am teaching ESS for the first time at Okran International School, Hyderabad. And as soon as I joined for ESS, in my school, my first point of contact was Guru Sir. And I would like to say a big thank you for Guru Sir to arrange this very informative session and taking the lead to arrange. And secondly, I would like to say thank you to Arvind Sir for being such an amazing teacher and such a great session. So, as I said, this is my first year. I have all doubts and I'm like, clueless. But last 1 month, I have been in touch with Guru Sir and some of my colleagues here whom I just connected, and they have been very helpful. I would not like to mention their names here. But I am learning and I'm taking those steps. And the most important thing, what I liked about Arvind Sir's session was how he started and with telling us that how to motivate our students, the set of students, what we get for ESS. They have a different mindset. They have maybe business or economics, something where they want to excel, and ESS, what they just take it to fulfill their criteria for sciences. So at this time our job becomes more difficult to get them into the right frame of mind. And we teachers always want the best for our students, whether they want it or not for themselves. I think we strive for themselves more than them. So that thing what Arvind said really touched my heart. That is how I started my ESS first lesson with my students. I just motivated them to be to engage with ESS. And the second important thing what Arvind sir was talking about is regarding the IA. So I just, I don't know which word to use. I scared them or what. I just gave them a very realistic thinking what Arvind sir said. He exactly said what I told to my students, that, the assessments, what they're going to give as a final, IB assessment, it's not in their hands. I don't know how much prepared they will be. But this is what is in their hands, this 25%, this is what they can bank on. And we as teachers, we can make that happen for them. So I don't know, for some I scared them, for some I motivated them to make their IAs correct and, score the full. So what Arvind sir said is a couple of the things which were really what I am practicing now. And thank you, sir. It was in a short frame of time. You have covered everything what a newcomer would like me would want to really start off with. So, and thank you, Arvind sir, and thank you, Guru sir, and all my colleagues who have always been very helpful, suggesting and guiding me whenever I need their help. Thank you, all of you.
Okay. So thank you, sir. So now it's my turn, sir. Arvind sir, thank you very much. Okay, for coming this session. I just wanted to last one thing. There are a lot of connection between me and Arvind sir. That's why actually we are on the talk. Like for example, we both are South. We both like Siranjeevi. We both like dosa. We both like Italy, and we both like Magesh Babu. Okay, so there are a lot of connection, and one of the reason, okay, the connection plays a very important role for me and Arvind sir to give this kind of wonderful session. So, Arvind sir, thank you very much. Any last word, Arvind sir?
Yeah, thank you, Guru. Thank you for arranging it, and thank you for those that wonderful feedback, everyone. And as I said earlier, don't just focus on getting a 6 or a 7. The question should not be how do I get a 7. The question should be how do I make children interested, in doing a particular IA, and they give that kind of time for the IA and do it. And leave the marking. See, as I said, it's a best fit approach. You may think you did a wonderful IA and you deserve a 7 in that, but it may be like it's not a 7. You may have got it around a 4 or a 5 sort of thing. It happens. Don't get disheartened with that. But thing is, end of the day, are you satisfied with the work that you did, and are you satisfied with motivating your children? And do you know that are your children motivated? Even if a batch of 20 students, one child goes up to do environmental sciences or environmental chemistry, whatever it is in undergrad or in future, then your job is done. And that's what I take great pride in, because when you do a batch, you know that when they graduate, at least 1 or 2 of them should be doing that as their career in future. And if you could do it, that's the best thing that we can do. That's what I think. So focus on that. And I saw some questions on the Padlet. Not many questions out there, but if you have any questions, please keep adding on to the Padlet. I think Guru will keep the Padlet on. Yes. And we can keep answering those questions as and when feasible. And maybe at the earliest, me and Guru will try to answer those questions as much as possible. And you have my WhatsApp and email address. If you have any queries, just send a message or put it on the group if you think the whole group should know about it. No issues, I'll always be there. And thank you for being such a wonderful audience, and I really appreciate the session. Thank you, Guru, for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you, teachers. Thank you, teachers. Bye, sir. Thank you all. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.